Okay, Sheikh, you can begin.
Inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma lakal hamdu kulluhu wa lakal shukru kulluhu. Nahmaduka ala ni'amika al-azima wa alaika al-jasima. Wa nusalli wa nusallimu ala Sayyidina Muhammad النبي الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Once again, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us in this endeavor of ours. Allahumma allimna ma yanfa'una wanfa'na bima 'allamtana wa zidna ilma. Ya Allah, teach us that which is beneficial for us and bless us in the knowledge you granted us and increase our knowledge. Today I have a very important personality, highly spiritual and highly motivational. It is none other than Sheikh Muhammad Mutawalli Sha'rawi, who is the Mufassir of the century, the Imam of preachers, and a friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I was truly inspired by this personality. But before I venture into this discussion, I would urge myself and everyone gathered listening to me to pray from your heart for our brothers and sisters who are oppressed and persecuted. Yes, facing genocide in Gaza and Palestine. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help them gain victory over the oppressors. May Allah defeat their enemies and grant our brothers and sisters freedom and dignity. So now I would like to begin this discussion. This is a truly inspiring personality. I have been inspired by him. I continue to read about him more and more as I was. He gave me an intense spiritual motivation actually uh, to come closer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let me, the outline of this today's discussion main points are, as usual, origins and milieu briefly, education, his career, his legacy and spiritual status, testimonials of scholars, what the eminent scholars have said about him and his achievements, and pearls from his wisdom. Truly, truly insightful, inshallah. So let us begin. Muhammad Mutawalli Sha'rawi, also known as Mutawalli Sha'rawi or Sha'rawi, was an outstanding scholar, acclaimed as the Imam al-Du'at, Imam of the callers to the path of Allah, or the preachers of Islam, and the Mufassir of the century. Undoubtedly, he was one of the top Mufassirs who explained the Quran in a way that would appeal to everyone, regardless of their level of understanding and education. His Quranic discourses attracted millions of people all over the world and continue to inspire and influence. He held various positions in both academic and professional areas. He was a professor at various universities in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Algeria. He also held various official posts in Egypt, including Minister of Endowments, yeah, Wazir al-Awqaf, Shu'un al-Islamiyya. More importantly, he became known as one of Egypt's most popular and successful Islamic preachers during his lifetime. Thanks to his efforts, so many people embraced Islam and millions were inspired to deepen their understanding and practice of Islam. Sharawi was born on April 15, 1911, in the village of Dakados, Midgamar, at Daqaliya, Egypt, to a farmer's family. His family had been, had a tradition of farming, and they were of medium means, middle class family. At age 5, he joined Zakazek Elementary School, and by 11, he had memorized the entire Quran. He earned his elementary certificate in 1923. Afterwards, he joined the secondary school. Early on, he developed a keen interest in poetry and literature, Arabic literature. He was elected as the leader of the student union, as the head. Some of his peers and colleagues, who later became reputed literary figures and scholars, would give their works, whatever they have written, to him for critique and correction. So this shows how excel how he excelled in his mastery of literature and composition and writing and articulation. After completing his secondary education, he had a dream of staying home and continue the family tradition of farming, which he loved, that village life more than anything else. So he wanted to go for it. However, his father insisted that he pursue higher studies at Al Azhar University in Cairo. Sharawi thought of a trick. He made an impossible demand. He told his dad, "Surely I will be pleased to do that as long as you get me the largest number of books." A massive list here relating to Turath, Islamic heritage, language and literature, and Quranic science, and other branches, Islamic sciences. His father saw through the trick he played, but still provided him with the requested materials. He bought all of them for him and told him, "I know, my son, I know most of these books are not prescribed in the syllabus, but I still prefer to buy them for you anyway, so that you are equipped with all of the available tools and resources to excel in scholarship and studies." In 1937, he joined the College of Arabic Language. At that time, Egypt was under British colonial rule and protests were held against the occupation. Azhar was the hub of the activities associated with the nationalist movements. Sharawi actively took part in anti-colonial rallies and related gatherings. As one of the most vocal student leaders leading the protests, he was jailed a number of times. Eventually, he graduated from the Faculty of the Arabic Language at Al Azhar in 1941, and then he earned his teaching certification in 1943. Later, he also graduated from the religious institution Tanta and held positions. So that means he will complement his mastery of literature with immersion in the religious sciences, Islamic sciences. In 1950, he became a professor of Sharia at the University of Al Qura in Saudi Arabia. This is a university in Mecca. In 1966, he was sent on a mission to Algeria, had the head of the Azhar mission, and remained there for 7 years teaching and preaching. It was during his stay in Algeria, the War of June 1967 against Israel occurred, and Egypt suffered a significant losses to Israel. Significant. Egypt was defeated. But ironically, Sha'rawi thanked Allah for the defeat. You may ask why? He said, Egypt did not gain victory under the communist leadership, because if they had won victory, it would have impaired the faith of the people, weakened the faith of Islam, of people in Islam. So people knew why Egypt was defeated because they were ruled by the communists, leaving the faith of the people in Islam intact. So this shows how insightful spiritually he was. He served as a professor and head of the Department of High Studies at Abdulaziz University in Makkah later between 1970 and 1972. He also served as the director of the Islamic Call at the Institute of Tanda Azhari and the director of the Grand Sheikh of Al Azhar. He was appointed by President Sadat as the Minister of Awqaf in Egypt in 1976. While serving in this high position, he did not simply warm, sit there to warm up the chair, but try to improve, continue, contributed significantly to religious and social matters in the country because he considered it his great responsibility on his shoulder. However, he did not continue in this post because he resigned in 1978 as he became increasingly disappointed with the rampant corruption of the bureaucracy. This is something, one of my other professors in Medina University wrote about, that bureaucracy in the Muslim country is so corrupt. They sit in the crowds high and they look around on the people who come to them for various needs. Now, legacy of this great scholar, Sharabi was a prolific scholar, preacher, and mentor. He has left behind works. Most of them were recorded by the students and transcribed as books. His work spanned various topics related to Islam, and he left behind a significant legacy. To list some of his notable works, to mention Isra and Miraj, because he was a highly spiritual man, as I mentioned often, he delved into the spiritual prophet's spiritual journey during the night journey, Isra and Mi'raj. He insightfully explored the significance of this miraculous event in Islamic tradition because for him it, it gives us a taste, a true understanding of spirituality and the fruits of spirituality and how it was reflected in the life and mission of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Another book, Secrets, Asrar Asma'illah, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Secrets of in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. The Quran, every surah except Surah Al-Bara'ah begins with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. What is the secret behind it? He explored the profound meanings behind the opening phrase of every chapter, except of course Surah Bara'ah, the 9th chapter of Quran. He discusses Allah's incomparable attributes of and mercy as reflected in the natural and moral orders, natural order of the universe and moral code of Sharia and Allah's laws as revealed in nature and in Sharia. Another book, Islam and Modern Thought. In this book, he shows us how there is complete harmony between Islamic teachings and modern thought. Of course, he's not talking about agnostic, he's talking about rational thought. Scientific, science and reason, it may be a better way to put it. He emphasized the need for critical thinking while remaining rooted, grounded in his faith in Islam and religion and revelation. another book, Islam and Women, Curriculum and Religion. This work covered multiple aspects such as women's rights, roles, and empowerment within an Islamic framework. He also explores in this work explores educational principles and the importance of knowledge while providing insights into religious practices and spirituality. Another book, Prayers and Pillars of Islam. In this work, he explains the significance of the 5 daily prayers, why we pray 5 times, and why, what is the meaning of faith, prayer, fasting, charity, and pilgrimage. What are the moral and spiritual implications or lessons that Allah wants us to imbibe and practice by conditioning us, by ordering us to perform prayers and to give charity and fast and make pilgrimage. Another book, The Path to Allah, At-Tariqu ila Allah. It's a guide to living a life of communion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always, constantly, our life should be centered on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, for this, critical aspects are, traits are sincerity, devotion, introspection, self-examination. Meaning you have to continuously examine ourselves. Self-discipline, we have to master our ego, discipline ourselves, and we have to strive to improve ourselves. These are the main steps on the spiritual journey. Rulings, fatwa. He provides religious rulings and counsel on common questions related to jurisprudence. His fatwas cover various aspects of daily life. And then another book related to the same thing, Great Fatwas. This collection further expands on his fatwas, addressing complex issues Muslims face. It's serving as a valuable resource for religious guidance. But the most important contribution, outstanding contribution, memorable contribution, abiding contribution of this great scholar is his tafsir, his works on the Quran, related to tafsir or Quranic commentary. His historical work spanning, 30 volumes remains one of his most significant insights in the Quranic verses and their practical application continue to inspire readers. It's not just, although he died, still it continues to inspire the readers, and it will continue to do so. In this insightful tafsir, he employs a distinctive method that sets him apart from other mufassirin, because he combined the analytical method with a thematic method, tahlili and mawdu'i. Tahlili method is he analyzes each word, each phrase, each ayah, and structurally, idiomatically, linguistically. And then he also look not just tahleel of just piecemeal thing, but also looks at the whole totality. Because Quran yufassiru ba'dahu ba'da, one part of the Quran explains the other. So it's not a piecemeal interpretation, taking one verse and just explaining it as if it is the whole understanding is in that verse. No, he has to take each verse in the context of the total revelation, because Quran does not contradict itself. So both analytical or tahlili and mawdu'i, thematic. Analytical approach involves dissecting verses word by word, exploring the linguistic nuances and grammatical structures. That's the analytical method. And what is the thematical method? Mawdu'i. This is a holistic approach because it assumes that Quran is coherent as a document, cannot contradict itself, and that each verse complements the other verse, and one verse explains the other. So the whole thing, it's a whole picture, holistic understanding. So in the overarching, it help him to understand the fundamental paradigms and the overarching themes of the Quran and the principles of Quran. Thematic method focus on thematic coherence, connecting related verses and exploring overarching themes within the Quran. And his style of interpretation, he emphasized a moral and spiritual training. That's his aim, that his message, his class, his discourse should emphasize moral and spiritual training, because Quran is not simply a fiction that you read for entertainment. It's a guide for life. It's a map Allah has given us to navigate through the rough waters of our life, challenges and trials and issues and whatnot. So it should serve as a guide to life of virtue, to virtuous living. Our institute is, the slogan is, education was virtuous living. So this is very, very important, because education cannot be detached in Islam from action, because there is no use benefit in knowledge without action, as Ali ibn Abi Talib said. Likewise, there is no benefit in simply chanting and reciting without understanding, without pondering, without reflection. So, with the aim of serving, exploring the moral and spiritual lessons, and to serve as a guide for life for everyone who reads the Quran, he draws moral lessons and spiritual insights and practical guidance for people to follow in their life from the verses of the Quran. Thanks to his unique method, presentation style, and delivery, he helps the audience gain a deeper understanding of faith, ethics, and righteous living. It's a very, very important fact of his preaching, his lessons, his lecturing. He followed the Shafi school of jurisprudence, which influences legal interpretation within the tafsir. Some say he was a Maliki, it doesn't matter. So Shafi and Maliki. Sharabi's tafsir combined rigorous analysis, thematic exploration, moral guidance, and adherence to jurisprudential principles, making it a valuable resource for understanding the Quran. Now, we spoke about all of this. Now, what is the influence? What's the impact? His influence on the broader Muslim community was significant, not only in Egypt, but also all over the Middle East, if not all over the world. Of course, the works that have been translated continue to influence, inspire others as well. His teaching, sermons, and scholarship left a lasting legacy. Let's explain it briefly. Number one, spiritual awakening. His passionate sermons resonated with the people from all walks of life, because he was able to connect emotionally with people, leading to the spiritual awakening of many listeners. So, this is the real importance of a real scholar and sage. His focus on inner devotion, sincerity, and love for Allah inspired countless individuals to deepen their faith. Number two, social and ethical awareness. Sharabi's preaching, his discourses, his lectures emphasize social justice, compassion, and ethical behavior, because he wanted his work to change individuals and the society, because you have to leave this place better than you found it. If it is corrupt, his duty is to reform, to purge the society of corruption. He encouraged Muslims to care for the less fortunate, fight corruption, and uphold human rights. His powerful messages reaching millions fostered a sense of responsibility in them towards society and motivated people to participate actively in social reconstruction, because there is no use for us to preach unless it is intended to affect, to change the society, to make it better and virtuous. Now, educational impact. As a teacher and scholar, Sharawi influenced generations of students. He was deeply committed to education and dissemination of Islamic knowledge, which really enhanced the intellectual growth of the community. His commentary on the Quran still remains widely studied and respected. Now, moderation and balance, another aspect. He advocated a balanced approach to faith, because for him, Islam did not come to obstruct, to stop the change. So it came to help humanity, while in the revolution, in the progress, in the advancement of civilization, while always keeping it on the straight track so that it doesn't go into excesses or extremes. So one of the things he tries to bring focus on his discourses is to balance. There is this dichotomy, this, because of the unfortunate way we have been teaching religion, there is a disconnect between lahir and batin. Lahir is outward rituals and performance and of religious worship, and then the batin, which is the spirit of the soul of ibadat, so soul of virtuous deeds. So he wanted to remove this gap and harmonize the two and balance, because that's very, very important. So, and also moderation. We cannot be overly ascetic, shunning the society, and we cannot be rigid in the way we understand and practice Islam, because Islam came to make life easy for us. So we have to rid this laws of its excessive, extreme interpretations, innovations, and interpolations. So he helped counter extremism and foster a holistic understanding of Islam. Sharawi was a media man. He is the first preacher, very, very important. He pioneered in using the media and popular culture as a method of guiding education, because this popular culture and media is often associated with vulgarities, obscenities, and filth, corruption. But Sharawi, recognizing the power of the media, power of television, power of popular culture and media, he used it. Media is the message, they say. So he was aware of it. So he used this powerful medium, his unique style, and his insights. Thanks to this, he became a cultural icon from 70s, 80s, and 90s. Sermons, a blend of wisdom and relatability, practicality, were broadcast on television and radio, reaching millions of households. They would all open, whether religious or not, because they want to hear him. He is very, very powerful orator, very, very practical, using examples and stories and anecdotes from their practical life to highlight the spiritual and moral lessons of the Quran. His impact extended beyond religious circles, shaping public discourse and values. Legacy of compassion and tolerance. Legacy of Sharawi was one of compassion, tolerance, and empathy because he encouraged dialogue, understanding, and unity among Muslims. Some so called scholars attacked him, but he never paid any attention. When his children told him about these critics, he said, I never read them, I don't want to read them because I will continue to do that. Everybody, no, you cannot please everybody. إرضاء الناس غاية لا تدرك. Imam Shafi advised his top disciple, don't try to please everyone, because if you do so, if you aim at that, it is an unattainable goal. So do what you do to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And while doing so, you may please the believers and you may displease others. This is based on the sound understanding of a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha, the mother of the believers and the beloved wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because when Khalifa Muawiyah radiallahu anhu asked Aisha, send a letter asking Aisha for an advice. So Aisha radiallahu anha did not mince any words. She just narrated. He said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever works to please human beings, Allah will abandon them to human beings, to mortals. But whoever works to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will take care of them. This should be a lesson for each and every Muslim, every preacher, every scholar. So, as I've been mentioning, his influence continues through his recorded sermons, books, and the memories of those who heard him speak. Now, coming, this is very important, his impact on the youth. He significantly affected young Muslims, inspiring them in so many ways. He served as a true role model and inspiration for the youth because his passionate preaching style resonated with the young audiences. He was able to connect with them emotionally, thus encouraging them to explore their faith deeply and deeply. His commitment to Islamic principles was unwavering and steadfast, and social justice. He was a beacon of inspiration in this to commitment to Islamic principle and commitment for social justice. It's very, very important. And of course, we have mentioned spiritual awakening, spiritual awakening of youth, he sparked. Of course, emphasis on sincerity, love of Allah, and inner devotion inspired them to seek a closer relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the youth found solace and guidance in his words during times of doubt and struggle. As an educator, he influenced students directly. His commitment to knowledge dissemination, encouraging Muslims to pursue education and seek understanding. His discourses on the Quran provided valuable insight for those studying Islamic sciences. Social responsibility. Sharawi's advocacy for social justice resonated with the youth. His calls for compassion, fairness, and ethical behavior motivated them to participate and engage with their communities. So, taking part actively in the social work activities, youth volunteered and started volunteering for various, works and projects in the community, making a difference in rendering charitable services. And of course, balancing tradition and modernity. So his approach in balancing tradition with and modernity appeal to youth, because the youth are living in the complexities of modern life. So he guides them how to navigate while keeping faith, how to face the challenges modernity. His views on critical thinking and relevance help young Muslims reconcile faith with the challenges of the modern world. So I already mentioned media influence. Televised sermons reach millions of households. People from all walks of life turned in to listen to him, learning about Islam and its practical applications. It was not confined to religious circles only. Instead, it permeated the very fabric of society, shaping public discourse and values and leaving an indelible mark on the cultural landscape. So his influence impact was multifaceted: spiritual, educational, and social. He thus inspired Muslims to live purposefully and contribute positively to society. Now, the most important thing that impresses me in this great scholar and sage of Islam is he was a deeply spiritual person. I have no hesitation in saying he was a true wali, a friend of Allah, as he was known in the community, not only in public, but among in the spiritual elite world. They considered him an icon of Islamic spirituality in his age, his time, something like that. A deeply spiritual, outstanding sage. He was a saintly person, deep humility, generosity, and compassion for the poor. So very, very important. A scholar, he was not a scholar living in ivory tower, but he was a man of the people, interacting with the humble, vulnerable, and the weak and the poor. That was the example set by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ. There has come to you a messenger from among yourselves. So he's relating with the poorest of the poor. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the maids of Medina would request to have time from Rasulullah, and he would go with them and listen to them, sit with them, listening to the whatever they have, open their hearts before him. He would accept the invitation of the poorest of the poor. Actually, this was the character of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this great scholar embodied all of these virtues, prophetic virtues. And he taught his children, made urged upon them to persevere in giving generously to the poor, never fail to help those who need, never ever say no to someone asking for help. He set an example for them by distributing most of his wealth towards charitable endowments and projects. Whatever awards he would get, he would distribute all of them, because he did not want, to deprive himself of the reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he received £1 million monetary award from the Dubai government for his greatest scholarly achievements, he denoted all of the amount, the total amount, to the cause of helping poor students of Al Azhar. He was known for his exemplary humility and asceticism, zuhud. as he lived a simple, unassuming lifestyle. Once he was expected to deliver a lecture, and the people were waiting for him, but he was not seen anywhere. So frantically, the people in charge of the lecture went here and there. Finally, they caught him cleaning the mosque toilet. On asking why he had done so, he said, I wanted to discipline myself as I thought of highly of myself because pride crept into my mind. So immediately I wanted to humble myself. Of course, this is what happened to Salafus Salih. We have the example of Umar radiallahu anhu. While on the mimbar as caliph, he was a caliph at the time, ruler of a vast state, and while standing on the mimbar, he thought highly of himself. Immediately, Umar radiallahu anhu caught and started reprimanding himself, reminding himself, were you not a humble shepherd, shepherding camels and goats and lamb for a rich Qurayshi man for pennies? How dare you think of yourself so high, Omar? Telling himself in the mimbar. He finished his sermon. Abdurrahman bin Auf went to him and said, you only ended up humbling yourself, humiliating yourself. Why did you do that? Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, the saintly caliph, replied, yes, I wanted to remind myself because my nafs whispered how high, how big I am now. So I wanted to discipline myself, humble myself. Sharawi was known for speaking the truth to the power. There are many examples, I'm just quoting them. When President Sadat insulted an esteemed Sheikh, Ahmad al-Mahallawi, an eminent scholar of Al-Azhar, Sharawi resigned from his official post with the government he was occupying and dispatched a message reprimanding Sadat, saying, Azhar University does not graduate dogs, but revered scholars. So you ought to know that. You are not supposed to degrade scholars, disgrace them. And while in Saudi Arabia, he learned that King Saud planned to move the Maqam Ibrahim from its present location to make room because there was a lot of crowding, around the Kaaba. So he thought it may be better to move that Maqam Ibrahim from its present location away, a little further away. When he learned that, Sharawi immediately sent a detailed telegram to the king, advising him against the move, declaring it as impermissible, and citing evidence from the sources and historical precedent to back up his ruling. But this was against the opinion of Saudi ulama, and Sharawi prevailed and convinced them of the error of the judgment. So king was convinced and rescinded the decision. He took back. So he did not implement that plan. He backed out. The king offered him a significant monetary award, but Sharawi refused to accept it. But when the king insisted, Sharawi cried, saying, I do not wish to be deprived of my reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What a great example he set for all scholars. Thanks to his highly spiritual status, he was gifted with extraordinary spiritual experience. These are known as karamat. You have the mu'jiza bestowed by Allah bestows on the prophets to support them in their mission. And the greatest mu'jiza of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the Quran. And of course, there are other extraordinary miraculous events reported, there are hundreds of them in the life of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, witness, but he never used them to challenge people, you know. But in the case, is it not these miraculous gifts are not limited to prophets? They are also given, bestowed on saintly figures, awliyaullah. All of us, if we are really deeply connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at least we may have experiences, our prayers are heard. We intensely pray for something and then we say, Allah answered this prayer. We should have this kind of experience. If you don't have it, work on yourself and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have sincerity in your devotion, in your worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in the case of others, they are more exalted in the spiritual status. They will have higher spiritual experiences. Those who study this call them as kashf or unveiling. This ghaib, the world of ghaib hidden from us. Allah can unveil, lift the veil partially for some people sometimes. So they have a peep into the next world, and they may see angels. They may see heaven and hell. They may see something, you know, of the other afterlife of veil from us, realm of ghaib. Ibn Khaldun, a social scientist and a scholar, explains them as the fruits of spiritual practices. Just like somebody, working on his muscle, he will have extraordinary physical prowess. Somebody, excelling his mental muscle will be an excellent scholar, analytical, scientist of whatever. The same way, if you work on your spiritual muscle, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you the fruits of these exercises and you may have something of such experiences. In the case of Sha'rawi, rahmahullah, he had a vision of Prophet Ibrahim while he was performing tawaf. And in Medina, he had a vision of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. Before his death, his children say he stopped eating for days because he said he wanted to be all alone with all alone. He's engaged solely in communing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So before his death, he had already predicted, he had already told his children that he is going to die on such and such day. So prepare the shroud and everything for him and instructed them what to do, asked them to clip his nails and things like that. And then just before his death, pointing to the wall in front of him, he greeted the esteemed figures, Sayyida Nafisa. He to deliver his lectures on the Quran in Masjid Sayyida Nafisa, and Ibrahim alayhi salam, and the Prophet's grandson Hussein, and some others. He continued to repeat, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. I testify there is no God but Allah. And his children were saying, say Washhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. But he was waiting for the Prophet to appear in front of him. And then he pointed to the wall again and said, Washhadu annaka Rasulullah. I also testify that you are indeed the messenger of Allah. Saying this, he breathed his last. What an excellent Husnul Khatima. It is sign of the viraya that Allah bestowed on this great scholar and sage of Islam. There are so many testimonials of scholars attesting to his greatness, his outstanding contributions. Sheikh Ahmad Tayyib, the Grand Sheikh of Al-Azhar, said about him, Sheikh Mutawalli Sha'rawi, Muhammad Mutawalli, stood out as an eminent mujaddid in tafsir. So there is tajdeed in hadith. Mujaddid can be, as Ibn Kathir has explained it, somebody can be a mujaddid in fiqh, another can be a mujaddid in hadith, another can be a mujaddid in sirah or whatever, usul al-fiqh. So in the case of Sha'rawi, this scholar recognized Indeed, by looking at his works, he is a mujaddid in tafsir. He interpreted the Quran while putting life. You know, the Quran comes alive. Each letter of the Quran, each word of the Quran, each verse of the Quran comes alive. And he projects a lively picture into the minds and hearts of the audience. His masterful delivery enabled people to connect directly with the Book of Allah and imbibe the message. And he earned the love, unconditional love and acceptance of the believers, which is a true testimony of Allah's blessings upon the one who dedicated his entire life to the Quran and his faith. Nadia Imara, another professor, a scholar, lady, female, he said, I studied under Sharawi and I had the dream of going for my doctorate. So I asked Sharawi to pray for me. So he raised his hand and intensely offered supplication for a quarter of an hour, imploring Allah's mercy on my behalf. And she said, he addressed me by calling me Dr. Imara before I earned my doctorate, and demonstrated his deep conviction that Allah would answer his prayer. And of course, Allah answered his prayer, and she earned her doctorate. Professor Ilham Shaheen. Sharawi was an extraordinary scholar, a rare gem in the annals of history. In his study of the Quran, he drew upon his mastery of linguistics, religious sciences, and contemporary times to present beautiful lessons that reflected the different levels of his audience. Of course, he was able to appeal here to everyone. He was an actual role model combining knowledge with action, showing no trace of nifaq or compromise or craving for power. He never used his religion to gain wealth or fame. And according to her, again Sharawi was a mujaddid who gathered around him students from all over the world who all benefited from his knowledge. And his works have been subject of several academic studies and dissertations. Sheikh Qaradawi said of him, Sharawi's passing has deprived the Ummah of one of its most outstanding scholars. He was an eminent personality who dedicated his life to the service of the Quran and Islam. He was also an exemplary role model who spoke the truth to the power. Now, let's conclude this by having a taste of his deep wisdom, because this is, of course, is very the treasure house of wisdom. I picked some only here. This will give you something of the taste of the sweetness of his wisdom. You must have a pure heart, a sincere intention, and a genuine desire to seek knowledge. It's very, very important for us to follow this advice. And he said the greatest form of patience is to persevere in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Knowledge without action is like a tree without fruit. Genuine faith is not just a matter of words, but should be reflected in our actions and character. If the faith is not reflected in actions and character, there is no use. Likewise, if knowledge you don't combine knowledge with action, it's like planting a tree which bears no fruits. Seek forgiveness consistently, constantly, for no one can forgive sins except Allah. Remember, Allah's plan is always better than your own. So trust in the plan of Allah. While planning, ask Allah to help you, to guide you to better plan your planning, and your work as well. Do not judge others, for you do not know their struggles, because you don't know how. So how can we judge other people? The path to success is through sincerity, perseverance, and reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not despair, for with every hardship comes ease. Inna ma'al usri yusra. Quran is not just a book to be read and chanted, but a guide for living a virtuous life. Your character is your true faith in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very, very important. Another important. Kindness is a language the deaf can hear and the blind can see. So treat others with kindness and be a kind person, a gentle person, a compassionate person. The true measure of a person's faith is how they treat others. Ad-dinu husnul muamala. How do you treat, you know, because you should see the other person, yourself in the other person, because we are from one another. It's very important. أن تحب لأخيك ما تحب لنفسك. Love for others what you love for yourself. Patience is not the ability to wait, but the ability to keep a respectful attitude while waiting. Very, very important. The manner, the adab, husnul adab ma'allah. The supreme jihad is the battle against your own soul's desires. Trust in Allah's timing, for He knows what is best for you. So you may be praying, 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 but you know so answer, because don't give up, because Allah will answer in His own time, in His own way. Do not let the world harden your heart. Keep it soft and full of compassion. No matter how cruel the world is, don't be cruel. Soften your heart. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. This is a direct inference from the hadith of the Prophet. Laysa shadidu bisura. The strongest person is not the one who can knock you out in a wrestling match. He is the one who can control himself. Genuine knowledge humbles the soul and increases one's fear of Allah. So if there is no humility, there is no fear of Allah, the person's knowledge is worthless. It's not true knowledge. The best investment you can make is your relationship with Allah. If you cannot speak the truth against falsehood, speak out against falsehood, then at least don't applaud falsehood. Don't praise it. Don't fear the applause of people, for the maximum they can do is to implement the will of Allah. Because whatever they do, they cannot do so unless Allah wills it. So you don't need to fear anybody. If you see a poor person in a Muslim country, there is someone there who has stolen his money. Because actually this is also an inference from the statement of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. No miskin stars except his provision is consumed by the rich. So meaning, you have the wealth is given for us to share with others. Eyes may betray a person, but the spiritual heart of a believer can never betray him. O Allah, do not afflict us with the calamities except to bless us with conviction about your wisdom in creation. So, calamities and trials, we should look at them and learn lessons from it. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do not send calamities except to teach us, to help us grow in wisdom, in spiritual understanding. Allah dispenses worldly abundance to those He loves as well as to those He doesn't love. But as for the wealth, the treasures of the next world, exclusively given to those He loves. So work for that, to have that abundance in the next world. If you care for the suffering of others, it shows that you are a genuine human being. If you don't care for the suffering and the pain of others, that means you have lost. You don't belong to the family of human beings. Finally, Lord, how can I worry when all of my affairs are in your hands? This is true faith, actually. Believe me, reflect deeply on these lessons from this great sage and scholar of Islam, the greatest mufassir of this century, the Mujaddid, the tafsir of the Quran. May Allah have mercy, shower this great sage with his immense blessings and place him along in the company of the messenger and the awliyaullah and the martyrs and the virtuous people, righteous people. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is the last episode in the series. Inshallah, we will resume. We have some other personalities, great personality to explore and study and benefit from. We will do that when we come back, return after September. So, in the meantime, I urge you once again to pray for each other, pray for the suffering, to feel for the pain and suffering of others, and also be motivated to work to make a difference in the world in the ways that this great sage of Islam has instructed us, advised us, as we have learned in this session. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.